So, getting a PhD or even getting an MBA or any particular degree is set up to make most people actually fail. I want to tell you a story, and hopefully, this is going to help you out. And then, what I'm going to do is give you some insight in what you could possibly do given who you actually are. And that's the really important thing. So, when I was going through to get my PhD, I had to write this thing called the GMAT. And those of you who know what the GMAT is, the standardized test. And a lot of schools use this standardized test. Um, it's like an SAT. I don't know if you've heard of that in America, but basically like something for graduate school. And when I was writing the test, I didn't have any money. My parents didn't go away to school. I was from a big family. And so it was all on me. The way that I paid for my undergrad mostly was through scholarships. And then I was also in this co-op program at a really great university where I worked most of the time. And so I didn't have any money. I was always living in like just one rooms, renting out rooms. And I didn't have any money in between my undergrad and when I went to graduate school. And so what I had to do is do things on the cheap as best as I possibly can. So the way that I actually studied for the GMAT is that I just I actually went just to the library and got a couple of books and just studied the questions from that for a week. And that was how I actually studied for my GMAT. And I only had a week because I had to get back to work. So I studied for a week. And when I did that, I was like trying to do these practice tests and I wasn't doing that great. And then when I went to go actually take the test, I went to it after a week and I took the test and I did, okay, mediocre. I think it was like a 630 or something like that. For those of you who know that score, it's kind of mediocre. But that was as best as I can possibly do. But now that I'm older and I understand the consequences of these standardized tests and how important that they actually are, they determine a lot. It's just basically like a cutoff. If you're not above these sort of standardized tests, nobody ever looks at you. And what I didn't realize was that there's these like testing courses that you can get access to. So now that I'm older, my kids, I'm going to encourage them to take these like for the SAT and any of these standardized tests to take these courses, but they cost money, and they cost about a couple $1,000s, and so my family, we can afford that. I know it's a lot of money for a lot of people. I know it's like really challenging, and that's the story that I want to say. When I was going through, I couldn't afford any of these kind of things. But now that I'm a little older and I've been working for a while, and we can afford this as a family. That I'm gonna get these standardized courses for my kids for these standardized tests, and all of this, if you think about it, is incredibly unfair. From somebody that is first generation, so I'm first generation into the university system. So basically, I'm the first one that went away, and to my kids, they get to learn from what my mistakes actually were, right? So if I would have had a higher test score, I'm more valuable everywhere else because all of a sudden, ooh, you got this test score. Because that's like, it means something to somebody, right? Like a lot of people get a lot of meaning from this. And if you have this, high score, so high score would be in the 700s, then all of a sudden you're like, okay, people would pay attention to you. But because I didn't have the money, I didn't have the resources, then I was fighting an uphill battle, right? I was fighting the sort of challenge that you fight. So, but my kids, because we do have the resources, they will get that particular course because we can afford to get that. Or any number of different things that we've been able to afford, my family has been able to afford for my kids. I could not have gotten those when I was younger because my family was big and we had one income. And so they did the best that they possibly can. So any extra tutoring or anything like that was not possible. It was not in the cards. I had to do this myself. And so that's where I want you to think about is, despite the fact, yeah, my kids have an advantage and it's completely unfair, right? Like, I understand how damn unfair that actually is. But here's the thing. They still have their own constraints that they have to work within. And so do you. You still have your own constraints as well. And I do as well. There's only so much that you can do with what you're given. And so you have to figure out, how am I actually going to change the world with what I am given? It's not some miracle thing, right? Like, if I had all of the resources in the world, maybe they would end up going, and maybe not, right? Like, maybe they would end up going, my kids will go to like some crazy school someplace, but maybe not, right? Like, I want you to think about that, given who you actually are. And that's the important thing. You always have to say that conditional was called a conditional, given with who you actually are, given with the resources that you have. This is the best that you can do. And yes, that's limiting, right? That means that you've got shackles on your legs. Always you've got shackles. Remember I told you the story, I don't know if you've been following, but I wore shoes that were nailed to a board when I was younger. And there was to straighten out my crooked feet. That is what I was given in life. And that's where you have to say, that's what I was given. This is what I have to do. And so for me to sort of escape those shoes, escape those shackles that we all have, that means you just have to repeat longer. That means that you have to adjust and be okay with yourself given your situation at this time, right? So maybe I could have gotten into an even more highfalutin school. Maybe, right? Like, that's what I think about, is that alternative. And maybe I could have been, you know, the person in my field, in my research field, and everybody would be like, ooh, but I'm not, right? And I don't have those resources, and I don't have that stuff. And so I need to come to terms with who I actually am and what I actually have. And so that means I need to work within those particular constraints. That means that I am going to forgive myself, give myself a lot of moments where I say, you know what, you did fantastic, given with the resources that you actually have. And that's talking to your past self, that person from a long time ago, and whether it was like 5 years old, and you're thinking about that past. Maybe you went through something just horrible, and you know that somebody took advantage of you, and it was something really, really terrible. I want you to go back to that person and forgive that person and say, you did the best that you possibly can, given with what you had at that time. That decision that you made, those choices that you made, were completely reasonable. And you have to internalize that. And then what do? Right? You can't just simply give up and say, oh, I had a really bad situation. No, you got to get back up and try one step at a time, one day at a time, one more thing, keep going, one more step until something happens, until it cracks. And what if it doesn't happen? What if it doesn't crack? What if nothing happens? That's it. I mean, it's kind of like I can either accept that I'm just going to just die, right? And accept that I'm done, or I accept that I'm going to take steps every day. And I know it's hard and I know it feels difficult, but I need to internalize that, where I say, I'm going to take steps. Yes, I had things in the background that made it more difficult than other people when I was compared. I'm not being compared apples to oranges. There's nothing about me that is similar to somebody else. My situation's completely different. And yet we all like to compare and say, like, everybody is the same. We all have the same. No, we all come from different situations, and we have to recognize those things and say, you know what? I'm a damn freaking awesome person, given with what I went through and what I have, and I'm going to take a step forward and love every single one of these steps. And I'm going to do that given with what I actually have. And that is okay. So you only have a certain amount of resources. That is okay. And that's what I'm going to do every single day. I'm going to try, I'm going to smile, and I'm going to say, you know what? If nobody pays attention, nobody does anything, that's okay. Because I'm doing the best that I can given the resources that I actually have. And that is a freaking awesome thing. And I want you to remember that every single day. All right, take care. Have a wonderful day.